Welcome to Quit Bleeping Around, a podcast dedicated to helping you achieve more in life. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hey, Super Achievers. In this episode, I'm interviewing John Mendez. John is a podcast host, social media guru, realtor, investor, and serial entrepreneur, eager to share his valuable insights with future entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, and innovators of the world. Welcome, John. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Christina. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you and honored to just be here on your podcast with you.
Well, thank you. Well, I am very curious about what our two most important days are. But before we get to that, can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Yeah, so, I had a little bit more stuff in my bio, but my tagline now is I'm the host of the Walk 12 podcast, right? I've been getting a lot more clarity as to what I really want to do and be known for. But I also I'm a licensed realtor. I've taught, tons of like social media classes to hundreds of realtors as well. So I ended up starting up my social media marketing agency. As I said, I'm going all in, especially entering this new year with growing the podcast. So I'm a podcast host for now. Keep it simple.
I love it. Okay, so what are our two most important days?
So before we get into the nitty gritty, I'll just give you the simple answer, right? The simple answer is the two most important days. The first one being is the day that we're born. The second one being the day we found out why.
Oh, I love that. Well, let's dive deeper. Where do we need to go?
Alrighty, so the day we find out why, everyone's born, right? If you're hearing this, you've been born, right? So the first day is not as important, and not that it's not as important, but you don't have to spend as much time, clarifying that part. But day number 2, right? The day we find out why. Most people live their lives and they never get this answer. They never live out to see the second day. They might live to be 90 years old, 100 years old, but they'll never live to see day 2, right? The day we find out why. And a lot of people nowadays, it's you're born, you're a little baby, and then you grow up a little bit, and then you get thrown into school. From there, that's when you get thrown onto the conveyor belt of life, right?
Yeah.
And you just go on the conveyor belt, cruising along, and then you most likely might go to secondary school or university or some type of, maybe a trade school, but most likely the university route. And then you get thrown into a job, and you stay there until your 60s, and hopefully you have enough saved for retirement, right? And then you retire, and you kind of go, drink Mai Tais on the beach, and you pass away, some years later. And that is the conveyor belt of life that most people are on. And that life is a very safe life. It's very mundane, very, there's not too many experiences that you experience, but then again, there's not too much, negativity that you might experience. You might not face, mass bankruptcy or having tons of loans in your name or taking a risk like moving across the country or to another country. Very simple life for the most part.
Yeah.
And that ends up leading a lot of people to getting to like this point in some people call it the midlife crisis, where you realize like, what else? Like there's this void that I haven't been filling. There's this hole, this emptiness that I feel inside. I feel like there's more. And most people, they see the phone ringing and they don't pick it up because it's like it's hard, right? Because when you pick up the phone, when you pick up that call, then you become aware of it. Mm-hmm. And when you become aware, you become responsible because now you know, right? It's easier to live your life on a conveyor belt because when you're on the conveyor belt, you don't know. It's easy. Ignorance is bliss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once, it's that Spider-Man quote, once you pick up the call, right, with great power comes great responsibility. And now it's either you're going to have to act or you're going to have to act as if you've never seen it. But now it's different. Before it was because you never knew. But now you know and you're choosing to act as if you don't. So now it's more than just, being on a conveyor belt. Now it's you choosing to be on a conveyor belt, which is a whole nother choice. It's a lot easier. So that's pretty much like that kind of the idea behind, the two most important days in your life. And, there's this concept called Ikigai. I'm not sure if you heard of it. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with it at all?
Yes, but please share for our listeners.
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't really know what Ikigai is, it stands for your reason for being. Mm. And this is just something that I found very recently. As I said, I'm doing some social media stuff and some real estate stuff, and I got a side job that I'm still doing. And it's like, I've been doing all these different things and trying to grow all of them at the same time and haven't been experiencing any growth in any of them, right? Because you could be a mile wide, an inch deep, or you could be an inch wide, mile deep, right? because what you focus on expands, and if your focus diluted across everything, it's kind of hard to grow a little bit. So
Yeah.
for me, I kind of use the Ikigai and a couple other things that I've learned with finding your purpose. And essentially, it's what we love to do. Like, what would we do if we were never ever to see a penny from? What the world needs, whether that's maybe fighting an obesity crisis, or maybe climate control, or maybe financial literacy, whatever it may be that comes to mind for you. Then the third is, what can we be rewarded for, right? Because as much as we like to help and serve others and do charity work, we do also have to feed for ourselves. And if you have a family as well, and if you have bills, which I'm sure most of us all do, and they still somehow have to get paid. And then the last thing is really what are you good at, or what I like to say, what do you have the aptitude to be good at, right? Because especially if you're earlier on in your journey, right? You might not have developed skills as much. Like, let's say you're a high schooler, right? You might have not developed really any skill much yet at that age, right? You may have some natural talents, but you haven't really developed anything to its fullest potential usually at that point, unless you have training and you were put into something early on. And so it's like, once you find that kind of intersection between those four things, that helps lead you to find that experience, that second day, right? The day we find out why. It may change, it may not, but it's like when you find the intersection of those four things, which is relatively really hard to do already within yourself, you're definitely on the right track.
Nice. Yeah. So, and I love how you mentioned, once we find out, we know, and it's, do we choose to stay on the conveyor belt? Or it almost sounds like, what is it? The red pill versus the blue pill?
Yeah, essentially, kind of. It's like the term I heard for it that this guy once said is willfully blind, right?
Yeah.
You're willfully being blind. You're willfully choosing not to see, to look the other way. Because once you already seen it, it's there, right? But like, you're intentionally saying, I'm going to put the phone back down. Maybe I shouldn't have picked up the phone.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's too late. You already picked it up. And there's like, the movie Men in Black, they have that little thing where you click and then your memories erase. Like, there isn't that in real life, right? You can't just click and you erase it. It's like you still, no matter how much or how hard you try to act as if you didn't see it, it's always there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we get that call. I love that metaphor, right? We get the call. And I know sometimes that with that comes a lot of fear. What do you recommend we do so that we don't go back on the conveyor belt?
Feel the fear and do it anyways, right?
Yeah.
That's the only advice you could do, right? Confidence is not, acting as if the fear isn't there, acting as if you're someone that you're not. It's feeling the fear and doing it anyways.
Yeah.
And I don't know too much in terms of like the prefixes and the suffixes when it comes to word and like the origins of words, but the word confidence, right? Con in Spanish means with, right? And I think it's a Latin root, but con means with, and then fidenz or fidencia means trust. So it's like, how much trust do you have with yourself, right, to get whatever has to be done, that you're going to act on your word, that you're going to see things through, that you're going to carry it out, right? Because if you have a lot of confidence, you have a lot of trust in yourself. It's not about not being scared. It's not about being acting as if the fear isn't there, being trying to put on a bravado or something to make you seem like you don't care. It's you do, but despite the fear being there, despite the monsters being present, right? Do you trust yourself enough, to handle that situation well and get through to the other side?
Yeah. Oh, I love that, with trust.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. So I love that. It's I know I hear people say, I'm going to be fearless. I'm like, that's not possible. Instead, right, let's be courageous, right? Because we are going to feel fear, and it's a normal part of the process. And instead, we need to do it anyway. So awesome advice. And then what do we do next? Where do we go from here?
So I'd say once you find your ikigai, right? Once you find, you see the fear, then the next step is discipline, right? Because it's like, all right, that exercise right there, and you can get a little bit deeper, and you probably honestly spend a whole entire day, maybe longer, on each circle, right? Trying to figure it out. You probably, it might take you a long time, like really getting clear, because not only do you have to find what's in each circle, then you have to find one that connects from the first circle to the second, and then from the first two to the third, and then from the first three to the final one, and all intersect. So that's pretty hard, within itself. It might take some time.
Yeah.
Pardon me. But after you do that, then the next thing is building discipline. And that's with small little
Yes.
things, right? Because motivation is overrated.
Mm-hmm.
Motivation will leave you in a heartbeat when you need it the most.
Mm.
Motivation will be gone as soon as you have a dark day and you slip up, and it'll leave you like nobody's business, right?
Yeah.
Like it was never there in the first place. So it's extremely important to build up, discipline, and that could start from little things, right? It's having that discipline is more so about, can you hold yourself to your own word? If
Mm.
you set a goal, if whatever it is, it's like, oh, I want to wake up 5 minutes earlier today. That next day, did you wake up 5 minutes earlier? Because if not, your body is not dumb, right? Your
Yeah.
body, your mind is not dumb. It's gonna realize like, hey, I'm not a person that upholds my word, and that's going to become your identity. And if you know about the reticular activating system, which I'm sure you do, right? It's like the way it works, it's like I like to call it like a heat-seeking missile. If you
Yeah.
like once you identify something, it's going to actively search out for all the pieces of evidence that support your identity.
Yep.
So if your identity is becoming someone that can't trust themselves, that you can't hold up their own word, that's all you're going to see. Your brain is going to give you more and more fuel to make that identity, to prove that identity right.
Yeah.
Which is also why people talk about like manifesting and visualizing and stuff like that, because your brain can't tell the difference, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to look for the evidence to support that identity. And whether that's good or whether that's bad, that's entirely up to you. It's a double-edged sword. It sucks, but it's also great at the same time because it puts the ball back in your court.
Yeah.
And so starting with little things, maybe, journaling once a day, but like things that are so small that you could do it without putting too much thought into it, right? Because it's not the goal that you're searching for. It's the little habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many of these little habits can I build up and stack? So that I can become the person that I need to become, and not being, so focused on the outcome, just being more so focused on the habits and habit driven. Because the results, let's say you're a salesperson, right? And you make 100 phone calls, and roughly it takes 100 phone calls to get 20 people on the phone, to get 5 actual appointments, to get one actual buyer or
Yeah.
seller or whatever, right? Let's say one day you make 100 calls and no one picks up. Well, if you were focused on the goal, you would think that, you failed. You would had a bad day, but it's about the habit. Because the
Yeah.
next day, right, you say, okay, I'm going to do 100 calls again. And that day, everyone that you call picks up the phone, right? It feels like you got the Midas touch. So being more focused on like the habits, I think, is definitely a very important part, and build it so that you could build that discipline to take that now clarity and vision that you have um, into more than just a vision, into actual doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. It's so we set our goals, create those routines and those habits around them, and then essentially work the routine, work the habits.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh, there was something else you said too that you're just full of wisdom. I love this. Well, what else do we need to know about this?
I'd say the next thing from there, right? You start building up some discipline. You start putting things into action. Um, Definitely get yourself a circle of people, and it's so cliche. Everyone talks about it, but
It's
it's
very
so
important.
important because, and I think everyone experiences this once you get into entrepreneurship. But it's like no one supports you like strangers.
Yeah.
It's in a different level of support. It's like, they genuinely have all the purest intentions, and they genuinely want to see you succeed. They don't have any, anything to gain from supporting you. They just want to support because they enjoy what you do. So it's like, find those people that are kind of doing what you're doing, because like as you start, getting more into your purpose, and the thing that sucks about it is that you'll start separating yourself from those that are on the conveyor belt.
Yeah.
And it sucks because I literally, just before watching this, I was on Instagram for a little bit while I was eating lunch. And I was watching, I only follow like entrepreneurs. So I have this thing called a Dream 100. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
the top 100 people that I want on my show. I followed
Mm.
all of them, and like I favorited them on IG. So when I go down my feed, it's all like entrepreneur stuff. So Alex Harmozy, he was talking about how he hates coming back home for Christmas because the person that people remember him, that how he used to be,
Yeah.
they haven't detached that memory of him to who he is now. So there's this big disparity between the Alex they knew and the Alex who he is now. So that when he goes home, it's like he doesn't feel as if like he doesn't have a easy time going back, because it's like I'm a different person.
Yeah.
And you'll start to grow out of some people, and being okay with that, because you're on track for something grander than what you could ever imagine, right? Especially once you really start getting in your thing, and it's like, do you cut off the entire world? No, but you become a little more okay with like, hey, like, you know, this is where my life is headed, and this is where I need it to go if I want to keep on living out, what I'm doing. Can you still enjoy time with your friends and family? Of course, but know what you're there for, and know that if they're not doing exactly what you want to do, you can't divert all your resources and attention to them. Not because they're bad people, just because eventually you'll get thrown off course, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah. Well, and I know too, when we tend to evolve and change, that can strike fear in others. And so they could potentially lash out because they want you to stay on the conveyor belt with them.
Yeah, it's safer.
Yeah.
As I said, but then you have to ask yourself, and I was talking to somebody else about this, what is safe? What is safety, right? We're in this time where, Meta just dropped like 10,000 employees. Twitter dropped like a bunch of half their employee, their staff. And back when iBuying, because I'm in also just so happened to be in real estate space, back when iBuying was a thing, Zillow lost a quarter of all their employees
Wow.
in a quarter, right? A quarter of their employees in a quarter. And close to 250 million. Like, what is safe? Is that 9 to 5 that you clock in on, in and out of every single day? Is that conveyor belt lifestyle really safe if your hands are, if your life, your destiny, everything is at the hands of, at the mercy of someone else's hands?
Someone else, yeah.
Or is it like, do I want to take a bit of a harder road and put it in my own hands? And I may not be as stable, but better that, and have the knowing that wherever you are is your responsibility.
Yes.
So if it's great, it's great, and that's you. But if it's bad, it's bad, and that's also you.
That's you.
There's no one else to blame, right? So
yeah,
it's kind of a double-edged sword, but it's a sword that should be picked up, or at least try to be picked up, right? Because if you can't be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship is definitely something that you might find very valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I can hear too, it takes a lot of patience right along with that discipline.
Definitely. And I can speak for that because I'm relatively young. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'm 21. So it's like, and I also grew up in a day and age of social media. I wasn't the most active on social media, but I grew up with it nevertheless. And so I have a very high pace, fast paced way of just operating, right? I want to go.
Let's do it now.
For people that know about personality styles a little bit, like I'm a type A kind of person a little bit. I'm also very talkative as well, but like I'm very, I like going at high speed. So I told you before we listened to we started this recording that I listen to podcasts and double speed and stuff like that, because it's like my brain is just on go all the time.
Let's go
it's
faster.
Like,
I
that that attached with combined with ego definitely was a little bit of a drawback a little bit, because for example, I didn't realize until probably like this month that we're recording that the podcast is my main focus, what I really wanted to focus on and grow. And so I was in real estate trying to grow that, and I'm realizing like, hey, I'm not hitting my goals. I'm not, selling houses. I thought first year, I come in top producer, selling houses left and right. I'm top agent, rookie of the year, and it didn't end up playing like that at all. And I should have realized sooner that the podcast is what I should have focused on. But I had my ego attached to the fact that like, no, I have to, I already got myself into this. I have to move forward with it because I already started type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to know when to quit sometimes. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not quitting because it's hard. It's quitting because it's not in alignment, right? Winners quit more than quitters quit. Winners just know what to quit at, which sounds kind of weird at first, but it's like you don't see anyone that's very successful still doing the day-to-day stuff, right? Because they have to quit some of stuff. They have to let some of that go. They have to leverage. They have to, in order to scale and reach the levels that they're at now. So it's not about quitting because it gets hard, but more so quitting because you gain more clarity, you gain more direction, more focus, and knowing what you want to put your focus into and where your time is best spent is something that's super important as well.
Yeah. Well, and I also love that you mentioned, so of course, being aware of who you surround yourself with, but you also curate your social media feed so that you have, for lack of a better term, what you're consuming every day is helping you towards your goals as well. So like no bad news, like focused on how you can improve yourself, that kind of thing.
Yeah. My mental diet is
mental diet. I love
amazing.
that.
Yeah, my mental diet, I try to make it as amazing as possible.
Mhm.
So even when I'm mindlessly scrolling, at least I have like people, as I said, like, Alex Hormozy and, like David Goggins and Eric Thomas and who else is a big name? Like, people that are, doing well for themselves and trying to, Tony Robbins, people like that. I love Joe Rogan. He
Mhm.
passed away, but not Joe Rogan. I'm sorry. What's his name? He was Tony Robbins' mentor. His name is slipping my
Oh, he's
mind.
had several. Like,
He
yeah,
has
Zig
Jim
Ziglar
Rohn.
or
Jim Rohn.
Jim
There we
Rohn,
go.
yeah.
Jim Rohn. I said Joe Rogan. Sorry about that. I got the initials mixed up. But Jim Rohn, like, he passed away. But people like that, it's like I spend a lot of time listening because they're so knowledgeable. And there's a quote I love. You said I'm very wise. And this quote is kind of, I guess, my answer to that. It's the only reason I see further than most is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah,
Right?
I love
It's
that
not
one.
me. I just happen to have a lot of smart people that I'm connected to that say things a lot smarter than I am, and I just kind of aggregate that information
Yeah.
a little bit. But it's not me at all. It's all the people I've been blessed and fortunate to have in my
Oh,
life.
yeah. But what's wise about it is that you actively seek it out and you consume it, right? So
Hmm.
it's not something that you just went in passing and you just happened upon it. You're actually, surrounding yourself, which I love that you say mental diet, because that is
Yeah,
important. It affects our emotions, which affects our thoughts, and then, vice versa. Like you said, the reticular activating system helps keep us focused. Um,
yeah,
and I love it. We choose our thoughts. So that's
definitely.
awesome.
I
Okay.
think
I
another.
know. Oh, go ahead.
Now I gotta say another quick thing too. It's like
Mhm.
keeping an open mind is very, especially while we're on the topic of
Absolutely.
purpose, and I don't want to go too much into a tangent, but it's like if you act as if you know everything, right, you'll
Mhm.
be a lot more closed off to things, that new opportunities, new experiences. And there's this one little story I'll leave you with, and it talks about Socrates, and he went around the city asking, who's the wisest man, and everyone was like, I forget how exactly the story goes. Long story short, he came across somebody that says, Socrates, you are the wisest man. And he was like, how could I be the wisest man? I know nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, having that open mind, and constantly being in search of, the information and better information, and, further developing yourself and not letting your ego
Yeah.
kick in is super important along this journey of, trying to figure out what your purpose is, and, why we were put here. All these big, grandiose kind of questions that you normally don't spend any time thinking about. Having that open mind is super
Yeah.
crucial.
Oh, huge. Yeah. What was it? I can't even remember, but I have found who said it first. But it's the more that you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Hmm. Exactly.
Yes. Well, so what can you share a little bit about your products and or services? I know you mentioned the podcast, but tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Walk to Wealth. So if you're interested in starting your walk to wealth, regardless of whether, when you're starting, it's never too late to start, right? The KFC founder started when he was like in his 60s or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
never too late to start your walk to wealth, right? And it's pretty much about, personal finance, entrepreneurship, real estate and mindset for the most part. And I created, for anyone that wants to try to, get off that conveyor belt a little bit and get into entrepreneurship, a training guide, a beginner's guide to entrepreneurship, which me and one of my other guest that hopped on the show kind of came together and created. So I make sure that you have the link so you could pass it on, and
Awesome.
stay on the lookout for a virtual summit that I'm doing in March.
Ooh, nice. Okay. What is your final piece of advice?
My final piece of advice is that your purpose, your mission, your why, your big thing isn't something that you could find passively.
Hmm.
If you're not into, one of the biggest problems that we all face, that there's opportunity everywhere, but because we're not aware, we don't see them in front of us.
Yeah.
And so it's like your passion, your purpose, your mission, whatever you want to call it, could be, right at your doorstep, smacking you in the face, and you would never realize because you're not aware enough. You're not, you don't know enough to realize that that's exactly what it is. And,
Yeah.
or you're not still enough or quiet enough to hear that the phone is ringing. Right. So it's like,
Hmm.
it's usually a lot closer than you think. Just spend some time, trying to reflect, and don't think about, what people are going to say. Like, for example, like I was in real estate, social media, and now I'm in a podcast all within the same year. Like, of course, people are going to think like, "Hey, John, another thing." Like, but it's like, don't worry about what other people think. Take some time to reflect, and
Yeah.
if it means doing a complete 180, so be it, right?
Yes.
Be confident that, have that trust within yourself that it'll all plan out. So I think that would be my final words.
Oh, I love it. Well, and I like to think about you're just rapidly evolving, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, John.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure.
If you'd like to learn more about John, visit his website at walk2wealth.com. For the gift he mentioned, go to bit.ly/walk-to-wealth-gift.
Interested in expanding your employee development program? Visit ChristinaEanes.com to look at the many workshops Christina has available for you.